while ago improved the yellow trajectory. It brought it down again, but it is still nowhere near what we would need to get to the 1.5 and 2 degrees. In other words, far stronger global action is needed to get us to those Paris Agreement objectives and to give coral reefs around the world a fighting chance. Now, as much as I might hope for a small marine park management agency in North Queensland to be given the global reins to energy and climate and emissions policy, that seems a little unlikely, but we do everything that we can to influence that debate. So we have a public position statement that we draw attention to at every opportunity, that only the strongest and fastest possible actions to decrease global greenhouse gas emissions will reduce the risks and limit the impacts of climate change on the reef. We think that at 1.5 degrees of warming, there is still a good chance of maintaining the Great Barrier Reef as a coral-dominated ecosystem that we would still recognize. There will be big impacts, no question, but the resilience of the system is likely to stay intact as long as we do everything we can with the local problems. The further above 1.5 degrees that we get, the closer that we get to 2, the more of a risk we're taking that we will see that long-term irreversible degradation of the system. And again, I can't predict exactly where it will be, but the closer to 2 we get, the more we are gambling with the future of the reef. And once we're at 2 and beyond, I don't really think there will be any functioning coral reefs in the world that are delivering ecosystem goods and services to people at all. So in terms of what we're doing, there is the Reef 2050 long-term sustainability plan. I said it's a joint plan between the Australian and Queensland governments. The most recent iteration of that plan was in 2018, but there is another review which is nearing completion and should be released soon. It is a very comprehensive plan, and I'm not going to try and go through everything that is in it, but suffice to say that it covers all of the actions of community, industry, and government across these 7 themes. To the work of the Reef Authority, we have what we call our Reef Blueprint, or Blueprint for Resilience, and that wheel on the right illustrates the 10 elements of it. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but there is a whole range of sort of science and bureaucratic actions, for example, about adapting policy and legislation and developing decision support systems. But the 5 key in-park elements are those in the dark blue in the middle. The key one there really is enhancing compliance with our zoning plan. So the zoning plan is essentially like a town planning scheme. It says what activities can be conducted in different parts of the park. It was designed in the late 1990s and early 2000s and implemented in the mid-2000s. And it is still held up today as a best practice example of marine spatial planning. And it really does do a great job as our foundational management for protecting the reef. Critically, though, unlike some parks in the world, it's not a paper park. In other words, we have a very strong presence out in the marine park, people, vessels, aircraft, educating users of the park and enforcing compliance with that zoning. And this is absolutely critical because there's no point in having pretty colors on a map if the rules aren't being enforced. And so that's a very important part of why our zoning plan is effective. One of the other things that I'd like to focus on is our crown of thorn starfish control program. And the reason I'm keen to focus on that is that both through scientific advice and through increased resources, that program is now bigger and more effective than it has ever been. We are demonstrating that we can protect coral cover at regional scales, and we are continuing to work to improve the program. Just to be clear, we're never going to eradicate the crown of thorns, but we are able to tactically control populations at key important reefs and protect the corals at those locations. So just to wrap up, I really want to emphasize that the things I have spoken about are not options. These things need to be implemented in a coordinated whole. The foundation of everything is tackling climate change. Continuously improving our traditional activities of marine park management, fisheries management, and land management is absolutely critical. But then there's a whole new range of activities that are either the subject of research and development or trials or ongoing adaptive management to improve them. And all of these things need to work together to deliver a better future for the Great Barrier Reef. And then my final point is that as important as the work of the Reef Authority is, we need to do all of this in partnership. And I think the Reef 2050 plan is a great partnership mechanism, but the simple truth is that now with climate change, we really do need a global partnership, because obviously it is actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions everywhere in the world that are critical for the future of the Great Barrier Reef. So thank you, Cass and Kate, and happy to take any questions if there's time.
Thank you, David. That